What's up, fiends? Alucard here. Today, I'm bringing you the 100 Years of Horror. So, the 100 Years of Horror tag that's going around right now, everybody's picking their favorite movie from every decade that horror movies have been around, starting with the 1920s to today. So, I decided to go ahead and try it, and let's see what we get. So, of course, let's begin with the 1920s. Um, The 1920s, of course, is known for all the silent horror, which I'm a big fan of. I do have a video on my favorite silent horror movies. I'll link that in the description below if you want to check that out. However, my favorite from the 1920s, I would have to pick Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. It's from 1920. It's directed by Robert Vine. It stars Werner Krauss and Conrad Veidt. Basically, the story is this crazy hypnotist guy that uses a somnambulist, aka a sleepwalker, to do murders for him. Um, it's really creepy. It's still creepy. It's 100 years old. It's 102 years old now, but it's still very creepy. It's a German expressionism style movie, so all the angles and stuff are weird. Everything's kind of distorted. There's like sharp points, and everything is. And it's very dreamlike and very weird. But I highly recommend it if you have not seen it. All right, so moving on to the 1930s now. Now, the 1930s was the height of the Universal monster boom, which I am also a giant fan of. I actually plan to do more videos in the future about the Universal monsters. But the 1930s has my favorite, well, one of my two favorite Universal monster movies. And so for 1930s, I pick Dracula, the English version, not the Spanish version. The Spanish version is very good, but the guy that plays Dracula in it is very meh. So, of course, I'm talking about the Bela Lugosi classic, directed by Todd Browning, also starring Edward Von Sloan and Dwight Fry as Renfield, who gives a outstanding performance. By the way, Dwight Fry is an unsung hero of the 30s for sure for me as an actor. But anyway, of course, Dracula is the story of a Transylvanian vampire emigrating to England and his preying on victims along the way. Bela Lugosi plays, I mean, he is essentially what I think of when I think of Dracula. His performance in this movie is phenomenal, beyond phenomenal, really. Um, just his little mannerisms, and oh, it's so good. And I can watch this movie like 1,000 times and never get tired of it. It's that good. Fun fact: this was the first sound version of the Dracula story. All the previous versions were silent. And this particular film is not directly based on the Bram Stoker novel. It is based on the play from 1924, I believe it was, by Hamilton Dean and John Balderstone. All right, so for the 1940s is my other favorite Universal monster movie. And of course, that would be The Wolfman. Wolfman is directed by George Wagner and stars Lon Chaney Jr., Claude Rains, Bela Lugosi, and Maria Ospinskaya. I think I actually pronounced that right. I think. Anyway, the story is, of course, about Larry Talbot. He returns to his ancestral home and saves a girl from a wolf attack. He is then bitten by said wolf and he transforms into a werewolf. It is the classic werewolf story, um, but I still think it's the best one ever done. And Lon Chaney Jr.'s performance in this movie, it's very understated, but very impactful. I feel so bad for him every time he's on the screen in this movie. I just feel sorry for him, and I just want to hug him. There's something about it. I don't know what it is. All right, so now we're going to move on to the 1950s. The 1950s was a kind of a pivotal time for horror because there wasn't a whole lot of it out there. And most of it turned to sci-fi and all these like mutant like bugs and alien flying saucers, that type of stuff. So that was kind of what horror was, a lot of it in the 50s. So the 50s, this one was actually kind of hard to pick. Um, but some people consider this one horror, some people don't. I think it's a mix of horror and sci-fi. So I went ahead and put it on here because it is my favorite, one of my favorite movies from the 50s. So for 1950s, I choose Gojira, aka the original Godzilla. Now I'm talking the Japanese version, not the American version with Raymond Burr. That came out in 1956, which was a they took this movie Gojira and added Raymond Burr into a bunch of scenes and filmed a whole bunch of other stuff and kind of made it into a different movie to Americanize it for the American audience. Now, now we're not talking about that one. We're talking about the original Japanese, directed by Ishiro Honda, special effects by Eiji Tsuburaya. And the only actor that really stands out in this one is Takashi Shimura. Of course, this movie, in case you haven't seen it, I'm sure you probably have. I'm sure everyone has seen a Godzilla movie by now. But anyway, so this movie is about Japanese authorities dealing with the sudden appearance of a nuclear giant monster. The special effects are, by today's standards, are a bit cheesy, of course, but that's part of the fun of it. This one is way more serious than a lot of the Godzilla movies. Um, the whole thing's dealing with nuclear holocaust and whatnot, and it's very intense. Godzilla eventually, later on in the movies, of course, becomes like, an icon and a hero and all this other stuff. But in this one, he was a complete threat. It was very much a King Kong type of thing. This giant monster coming at you and crushing things, and it's Godzilla. So I mean, how can you not love Godzilla? All right, moving on to the 1960s. I mean, there really is only one movie I can choose here. Um, yeah, there are a couple, but I mean, come on, I have to go with Psycho from 1960, the absolute classic from Alfred Hitchcock, starring Anthony Perkins and Janet Leigh. If you don't know what Psycho is, why are you watching my channel? Uh, I'm just playing. So Psycho is about a shy motel proprietor, and he gets involved in with an embezzler. So Norman, the hotel proprietor, is not exactly what he seems, and we'll leave it at that. It's an absolute classic. If you haven't seen Psycho, please stop this video and just go watch Psycho right now. Like seriously, like yeah. If you haven't seen Psycho, what's wrong? And of course, Psycho is also known for being one of the earliest slasher prototypes. So, and as if most people know, I'm a huge slasher fan. So this is kind of where it started. Yeah, there were a couple before this that you could consider, but this was really the first big slasher type movie. Moving on to the 1970s. All right, I said I'm a slasher fan. So guess what my favorite from the 70s is? Got it. Halloween 1978, directed by John Carpenter. Stars Donald Pleasance, Jamie Lee Curtis, PJ Souls, and a few other people. Of course, this is about Michael Myers, the murderous mental patient that escapes and returns to his hometown only to stalk a female babysitter and her friends. On, of course, Halloween. I mean, what has not been said about Halloween? It's an absolute classic. Um, I watch it. I've watched it probably 100 times. I don't know, and it's really the quintessential. I would say it's kind of the quintessential slasher film by now. So Halloween currently has, I think, 12 movies in the franchise. Only one does not have Michael Myers. As a series, this is also one of my favorites. And fun fact, as a kid, Michael Myers scared the bejesus out of me. He was the one that was in my nightmares. He, yeah, he was the one that frightened me. Not Freddy, not Jason. Michael was the one that I was scared of. All right, so 1980s. This one was very tough. There were so many great horror flicks from the 1980s. But I'll have to go with the one that I think is probably the best made and one I've seen dozens of times. And that's The Thing from 1982, also directed by John Carpenter. Stars Kurt Russell, Wilford Brimley, and Keith David. This story is about American researchers in Antarctica that encounter a parasitic alien life form that assimilates, then imitates other organisms. So basically, what they have here is a shape shifting imitator. So basically, it can imitate any kind of living being, like a dog or a person or anything else. And when it does, you don't, you're not aware that it's this thing. Hence the title, right? But anyway, the performances in this movie are fantastic. The special effects by Mr. Rob Bottin are absolutely amazing. Even today, they look so great. And to me, Rob Bottin really does not get enough credit. He did all the special effects on The Thing. He did special effects on The Howling. So yeah, check out Rob Bottin's work. If you're into like special effects makeup and stuff, to me, he's right up there with Tom Savini and all those guys, and Rick Baker. Yeah, all them. And an interesting tidbit about this one: there are no female characters in the movie whatsoever, and there was one female on the crew, but she had gotten sent home. I believe she had gotten pregnant or something like that, so she had to leave. All right, the 1990s. This was also a really tough one to choose. But I'm going to go with a creative team that I am a big fan of. I'm a big fan of both guys. Of course, we're talking about From Dusk Till Dawn from 1996, directed by Robert Rodriguez and written by Quentin Tarantino. This movie stars George Clooney, Quentin Tarantino, Harvey Keitel, and Juliette Lewis. This is a story of the Gecko brothers, played by Clooney and Tarantino. They are a brother team of criminals, and they take a family hostage, and they end up in a bar in Mexico. But the bar in Mexico is actually a vampire bar. So this was one of the first movies I ever saw switch genres in the middle of the movie. First half of the movie is kind of a crime movie and them kidnapping the family, and it's not horror, it's just like action crime stuff. Then midway through, when they get to the bar, all hell breaks loose, the vampires come out, and it turns into a bloodbath vampire movie. And at the time, that blew me away. I was a teenager when this came out and saw it, so yeah, I hadn't really seen anything like that before. I know there have been a few before it. I know that now, but back then, this was the first time I saw something like that. So it really impressed me a lot. And yeah, I've watched this one quite a number of times. It has a couple of sequels and also a TV show that was really well done. The first season of the TV show is basically the story of this movie, just elongated and stretched out. All right, so for the 2000s, this one was way tougher than I thought too. I didn't realize they had that many pretty good horror movies that came out in the 2000s. I will, a couple of honorable mentions for this one I'll even give you is Trick or Treat and Let the Right One In. Okay, so those are the honorable mentions. My favorite from the 2000s is Behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon from 2006. It's directed by Scott Glosserman and stars Nathan Basil, Angela Goethals, Scott Wilson, Zelda Rubinstein, and Robert Englund. And also Kane Hodder has a cameo. Okay, so basically what this one is about, and if you haven't seen this one, I do urge you to try and see it. I love this movie. It's about a journalist and her crew following the everyday life of a serial killer. The serial killer is inspired by slasher movies. So by Freddy and Jason and Michael, like those are his heroes. So it's about it's sort of it's a mockumentary type of deal, but it's played. Some of it's played for laughs, some of it's played for scares. It's mostly played for laughs. I will say that. But it's so well done and clever. Clever was the first word that I really think of when I talk about this movie. So yeah, I highly, highly recommend this one. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon. All right, and finally the 2010s. This one was also kind of difficult to choose, but this one really stands out to me. Um, and of course, it's What We Do in the Shadows from 2014. Directed, written, and starring Jermaine Clement and Taika Waititi. This is a New Zealand film. It's also a mockumentary, like Behind the Mask. Guess I'm into mockumentaries. I don't know. But it's about a documentary crew that follows four vampires living in a flat in Wellington, New Zealand. And they are inept vampires. They're funny as all get out. And it's them just like living their lives and going to masquerades and all this other stuff. But they're so goofy, and they don't blend with humans and stuff at all. And it's so funny. And of course, there's now the TV show on FX of What We Do in the Shadows. It follows a different group of vampires, and it's probably my favorite show on TV right now. It is so insanely funny. So I highly recommend both the movie and the TV show. You can watch one or the other or both. They're separate entities. However, some of the characters from the movie do appear occasionally on the TV show. So for the full story, you kind of have to watch both. But yeah, What We Do in the Shadows is another absolutely hilarious um, horror romp that should not be missed. So anyway, I hope you guys all enjoyed my list here. This was actually really a lot of fun to do and had me thinking a lot because there was quite a few that I had to uh, knock off, to just choose one. A couple other honorable mentions are Rosemary's Baby, um, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, just to name a few. So give me a thumbs up. It really helps me out. I appreciate it. And subscribe if you're new. And I will see all you guys next time. Remember to stay spooky. Peace.